And I have to give you my true birthday and
If you
everything.
want to lie, you can lie.
I can lie.
Is it necessary?
Yes.
Okay. I'll tell you why it would be useful to me to have the real information.
Just a moment. Have you got it on now already? I see.
Because it puts you at a certain age at a certain time, so that it makes sense when you were talking about 1942 or 52, whether it's a 20-year-old who remembers or a 40-year-old or a 15-year-old who remembers makes a difference.
Okay. First of all, you wanted to know where I was born.
And your full name.
And my full name, the name I carry is my name. I don't carry my old names. I was born in Czechoslovakia, in Moravia. And 1918. And our families were living as much married to Frenchmen, to Belgians, to other people, because this was Czechoslovakia, you know. The people were sent to schools, to Switzerland, and so on. It was a very sophisticated. And here I'm speaking about the time when there was a Czechoslovakian Republic, when Masaryk was president. Thomas Garrick Masaryk.
You're banging the room
Oh, I'm
on
sorry.
the floor.
I'm sorry. And consequently, we were traveling a lot, and we were brought up in several languages. The French governess was in the house, of course, and then the studies were in Czech and in German, in both languages.
And the family name was Adam?
No. My maiden name was Stöckler, Steckler. My father was a doctor, and unfortunately he died when I was 8. And he died on leukemia, and he said to his old doctors, who were his teachers, who came to visit him, I have to die. In 20 years you will have found something against this illness. So then, of course, I was sent to school to France, and as a very young girl, I married a friend of mine, a very nice Czech man.
How young is young? 17?
18. And I was studying in France and fancy. That was all before World War II started. When it was very obvious that there's going to be a Second World War, I sent my cousin, who was in French and married, to Czechoslovakia and got the message to get out of France. I left France with the last Simplon Express 4 days before the war started for Trieste. And spoke to my husband's business friends in Yugoslavia and said, "Where's Francie?" He said, "Standing next to me," which was Split in Dalmatia. Spalato Split.
Yeah.
And one of the diplomats came to fetch me, and I traveled from Venice to Split, where I arrived on the morning when the war started, which was September 30th. And of course, Francis wanted to fight right away, but they needed him there. So we stayed in Yugoslavia, where I had a very interesting time, insofar as I understand today the animosity between the Muslims and the Catholics, because it always existed.
Always.
Split. No, Dalmatia was a very Catholic country. You see, so there were these few Muslim families, but they were outcast, more or less.
What is your religious background?
No, nothing, because my family was so mixed up.
Uh-huh. But what were you? What would the enemies have perceived you as?
What do you mean, the enemy?
Anybody's enemy. If somebody didn't like you, what would they have identified you as?
Nothing. That didn't exist then. You believed in God. And the religious studies I got them more or less at home.
What religion?
Humanity.
Uh-huh.
We lived a completely different lives then. Don't forget, my family started, for instance, in the 17th century, my mother's family, they owned a malt factory and sold malt to America in the 17th century. I have a completely different background than
Most people.
Than most people. And now, for instance,
where did you survive the war?
I just tell you. So we were there in Split, and of course met the most interesting people who had something to say during the war and after the war. And Francis wanted to join the army and fight. In the meantime, France went down, fell. So that was the last moment for him, and he said, now I have to go to the Middle East Army. And
His last name was Adam?
no, my
Second husband.
name was Adam. Consequently, we left. The Middle East Army was in Palestine, Egypt, Palestine. And we left with a Simplon Express by Istanbul for Palestine. Francis and I, we were taken out from the train, because that was then in German hands. So they didn't let him go through, though they knew pretty well that he's going to fight on the on the Allied side. And I was kept for 5 days at the Syrian border before I was allowed to continue to Palestine. And then they let me go, and Francis joined the British, of course. And I, after a few weeks later, wanted to do something and worked a little bit for the Allies, and then was sent to Beirut, where I lived for a long time, skiing at the Cedars and swimming the next day in the sea. Then Francis fought in Tobruk, and then he was sent for the invasion to France, to England, and from England to France. And here I was, this very young girl. Of course I wasn't alone, and met a lot of people. And then I met Robert Adam, who came from Romania.
In Beirut?
No, I was back in Palestine.
Where in
Tel Aviv. And then thank God we won the war. And Francis was with the army in in Germany, fighting their way through back to Czechoslovakia. Get me?
Mhm.
And March 46, I went back to Czechoslovakia with a military transport, of course, like all the wives of military people. And I pretty well realized what's going to happen, politically seen. Robert Adam, during the war, got the message that not only his sister-in-law died giving childbirth to the second child when the husband came back from the army, but the husband, as a doctor in Brittany, died also. So Robert knew that here were his niece and nephew with no parents in France. So he said to me, I'm going to France and I want you to join me. So not wanting to live in Czechoslovakia, I left Czechoslovakia, went to Paris, and after a year I divorced and married Robert. During this time, he went to see the children. Alain lived in Rambouillet. Monique, who is 9 years older, lived in Rennes with friends after the death of their parents. And Robert said to me, Anne, we are going to get married and I'm going to adopt the children. So that's how Alain came into my life.
What about Monique?
Monique was 9 years older, so for Monique it was normal that she comes to Paris and goes to a lycée as a pensionnaire. Mm-hmm. And Alain came into my life age 7 and something to Paris. I put him into...
The two of them came, but Monique was sent to a pension. Uh-huh.
As pensionnat jeune fille à Versailles, lycée à Versailles. I put him into a marvelous Catholic school because it was around the corner, so he didn't traverse the street. I was sure that nothing can happen en route. And of course he had the best life that you can imagine. I started him right away with all the sports, horseback riding, and later on skiing. And
did he keep a relationship with his sister?
Of course. Oh, just a moment. Monique came back to Paris, to the Lycée Jules Ferry, after 1 year. So both children lived with us, of course. And my dear ex, Robert Radon, was not the man to live with one woman. And I don't know if I really realized it well enough, because I left this marvelous husband of mine, my childhood friend. In any case, we decided to send Alain to an English school and got him into a marvelous school thanks to my cousin. And the school was on the territory of the Queen Mother's family. After the war, the tax situation was so bad that they rented part of the property to this very good school. And he was very happy. He went to this English school without knowing one word of English. And 3 months later he came to Paris and didn't speak any French. I mean, picked it up, of course, right away.
How old was he when you sent him away?
9. And in the meantime, Robert decided to separate, and I lived in a beautiful apartment in Paris alone, and my cousin who lived in New York didn't want me to stay alone in France. She wanted me to come here to America. She was much older. And she was the person who knew the Trigers because her son, Pierre Lalonde, was in school with Jean-Pierre. So her husband came to Paris and said, "Anne, you are coming to America."
How did that seem to you? A strange idea?
No, because she was much older and she more or less always wanted to be in charge of me.
But did you like the idea?
I did. And amazingly, I got the visa very fast.
What year are we talking now?
54. And
So at this time, Monique is how old?
in the meantime, Monique came to America to her, before she came to America to her father's aunt and finished here, I think it was the Lycée Français, and then college. And in 1953, she married an Egyptian, a very nice man who was sent to America on a scholarship. You had to be very bright in Egypt to be sent on a scholarship to one of the famous colleges. And she married him, and they moved to Alexandria, where she gave birth to a son. The son's name is Ibrahim el-Samak. That was the name of her husband. And
She became Muslim?
no, she was a devout Catholic, having lived during the war in Rennes, as an orphan, and so on and so on. And
Is that where she is today?
no. The times were very, very bad in Egypt then, especially for this kind of very liberated Muslims who studied in America. And Robert helped them to get to America, and they lived here. She later divorced. Alain, after this very good school, got into Harrow. I went to see him, of course, to Harrow, and even the headmaster of Harrow was marvelous to me, because normally you cannot take out a child from the school, and I was, yes, allowed doing it. And that was before I moved to America. Then in 1954, I came to America.
Leaving Alain there?
Oh, of course, at Harrow.
Yeah.
I mean, my husband was in Paris,
Right.
I mean,
So the child was in London, the father was in Paris, and you went to America.
Right. Just a moment. 1 second. Alain wasn't in London. He was in Harrow in the school, which is not, And then I came to America, and here, the next day right away to East Hampton, to this most plush life you can imagine, at my cousin's house. and the social life. And of course everybody expected me to marry one of the rich men or to be... Oh, I'm sorry.
I know,
And,
do something else.
Right. And on that I said, no, I'm going to work. So now I get slowly to the... So he says, but you never work, what are you going to do? So I walked into Lord and Taylor's, and they got me right away as a sales girl. Then I had another job.
What year is this?
1954.
54.
And then I
How
had...
old are you in 1954?
18, born 54.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
Thirty odd years.
36?
Something like that. And can I give you another cup of coffee? So I started to work here, and moved from my cousin's beautiful house on 61st Street here to this apartment, which is very near to her house. And led a very full life. Always in the dress business. My other big job was with Evelyn Burns, who was very close to Pauline and Robert also. She had a store, 480 Park Avenue, the corner store. And she sent me to Beverly Hills to buy. She said, you will buy whatever you like to. And that was my big beginning, because one day I got a call from Adam Gimber to join Saks Fifth Avenue.
So you were buying for Evelyn Burns?
Burns.
And she sent you to buy...
In Beverly Hills, of course.
What was in Beverly Hills?
Galanos and all that.
Galanos, right.
And with whom I got very friendly, incidentally. And Adam Gimber called and asked me to come to his house, where I was received with the drink, the butler, the dog, everything beautiful. And he said, Madame Madon only spoke French to me. Whenever you want to come to join Saks Fifth Avenue, we are here for you. And something happened at Evelyn's, and I said, I'm leaving you. She said, this time I know it's Saks Fifth Avenue, it's Adam Gimber. I gladly compete with them to pay you the same, and God knows what. I didn't say one word, but I joined Saks. And after a few months, as a manager, floor manager, and after a few months, I became the evening dress buyer.
The evening dress buyer.
That's how I met Pauline. In a very close relationship. I bought then for 26 stores.
A close relationship with?
With Pauline. Business relationship. And Robert, of course. They got along then, but nevertheless, there were two completely different mentalities. Pauline was 100% concentrated on her business. And your father was a man with whom you could talk about whatever. He discarded the business in the evening. You never heard him saying one word about business in his private life. Did I give you some information now?
That's a nice touch.
That's what I
never thought of that.
That's exactly. I knew Robert very well. He came to see me, and even when I still stayed with my cousin, or I took him to my cousin's house, and then he came here. I knew him very, very well. And then...
How well? Did you ever become intimate friends?
No. I mean, yes, intimate, but then he got involved with this Swedish woman, and while I was the big customer then at Pauline's, he left, married this woman, and they went to Beverly Hills.
Let's back up a bit. Tell me about going to the shows at Trégères.
Regarding what?
Tell me what it was like. Describe it as for someone
was
who's never been to
absolutely-
a show.
Oh, I have been to shows because
Describe it for someone who's never
who
been
is
to a show.
it was a marvelous atmosphere at Pauline's, the shows. Of course, I was treated not only at Pauline's but everywhere as the best, buying for the biggest stores. This kind of price line.
So who were the big names that you would, you were obviously a royal guest. Who were the big companies that you would go and buy from? The big names? Norel.
Of course. Oscar. I mean, more or less I was the first one at Oscar when he went on his own, and with whom I got very friendly. All the big designers, but the big thing was that I started to import, to copy the French clothes.
What year
So I
was
went
that?
4 times a year to Europe.
We're talking now 56?
No, my gosh, I started to work for Sachs in 61,
Oh, okay.
so it was 63 probably.
Uh-huh.
And I was the first one to copy the Galitzin pajamas, Irene Galitzin, Rome. And I had all the big designers. Nevertheless, Pauline's merchandise had a certain reason, made a certain sense. Pauline's dresses were for the well-dressed woman.
Mm-hmm. The wealthy, well-dressed woman.
I'm sorry?
The wealthy, well-dressed woman.
Yes, not the chic woman.
Tell me. This is interesting.
Now, for instance, she never understood why I don't want to wear any of her clothes. How can I, with my body, wear Pauline?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I bought Pauline's dresses having in mind the rich, well-dressed woman for a certain size, Beverly Hills, San Francisco, and so on and so on. And I did very well, of course, with her clothes. Coming back to Alain, are you going, you really don't want anything? Can I give you a drink now?
Do you feel like you have to stop for a bit?
No, I just thought I want. 1959. Just a minute, let me think it. He was born in 1942. 1959. I got a call from Robert, sending you Alain. I got scared to death. He is 17 years old boy, second year Harvard, 18 years old boy, second year Harvard, coming out of Harrow, you go automatically to second year. If you come from the European best schools.
Same thing happened at the Lycée Français.
Exactement. And so I said, my gosh, here I'm working the whole day.
But he's going to be at Harvard.
But still weekends here. He wanted a family. I think it was 1 year later that you met him, or maybe 2 years later.
You were living in this apartment?
Right.
Where did he, when he stayed, when he came to visit?
I had a bed.
In the sofa?
Oh, I have a regular bed, which I have in the closet.
Uh-huh.
And I had sometimes 8 boys here. And they were all amazed. How come you're at home, Mrs. Allen? So I said, because I enjoy your company. You're intelligent, brilliant people. Oh, Mother wouldn't do that. She's too much involved with all her charities and so on. I mean, I know the most marvelous people. I personally didn't need any help from the people who surrounded me. I bought what I thought is right without people speaking too much about it. I just can give you the example what happened with Oscar La Renta. I was very close to Françoise, to his first wife. And Françoise, when she came to America and started to work with him, I came to the fashion show and then had my buying appointment and sat next to her, or she sat next to me. And she said to me, "Anne, why don't you buy this?" And I said, because I need the other things more for all the cities I'm buying. This way I saved them so much money. And Françoise let me do it. And I made amounts of money because I didn't need any communication or any advice.
So how did it work at Trégères?
I did what I felt like doing.
So you would go to the show, mark the numbers of the dresses that you were interested in. You would come back for the buying appointment and just put the order in. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even need to mark the first time during the show because I knew exactly what's what.
Uh-huh.
You see,
What?
don't you want to have it?
No. What was when you were going to the shows? Was Robert narrating the collection?
No.
No one narrated the collection. No
I
one
think
said,
it was Pauline.
Pauline did.
Mm-hmm.
Because my memory is Robert.
Oh, but maybe Robert. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But
So did you see Robert socially?
very few times.
So how did he know you well enough to say,
Alain.
let's have Alain tutor Janie? How did that happen?
I mean, I knew him socially a little bit, but he knew that Alain is in America. I told him the whole story. And I think it was the brightest idea, and Alain was very happy of doing it. You know, it was his vacation time, and so he went. He was very sweet yesterday. When I spoke to him, you know, that you are coming. Of course, he hasn't got any time. You know, Alain is the big shot. He lives in London.
What does he do?
Banker. A very famous firm. Fuhrmann Seitz, representing in Europe. And
Fuhrmann Seitz?
Fuhrmann Seitz. Fuhrmann Seitz. And he and his wife, second wife, she had 2 children, or she has 2 children, who are by now grown up. I knew them when they were 14, 15. Now they are 24, 25. They adopted an Indian child, and I always had contact with India, and met the head of the orphanage. And when the right child was there, so they let them come to India, and I adopted it. She's incredible. She's going to be 5 years old.
This is very interesting.
Oh, fantastic.
So he was adopted, and now
that's
she's
why
adopted.
that's why he adopted.
Yeah. They're not going to have their own children.
No, they're both too old. They couldn't produce anymore. The last time when I was in England, not the last time, but one of the last, Kitty drove me to the airport, and she said, you know, tomorrow I see the gynecologist, because you know how much Alain wants a child, and I thought being pregnant, but then I started to bleed again, you know. So she just couldn't conceive anymore. And that's when they decided But the nice part about it is that they adopted the child about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. No, 3 years. And he brought her Thanksgiving Day to America for me to meet. Isn't that the most incredible story?
It is incredible. It's very lovely. It's touching.
I mean, he leads an incredible life, Alan. You know, he's a big country which is in the magazine. You want to see the magazine?
You'll show me afterwards.
Okay.
Okay, so what else is there to say?
So, apropos to the jail,
The company?
it was really Pauline who was running the show in every way.
Mm-hmm.
One had the impression that Robert didn't have anything to do with it, that it was just Pauline.
Mm-hmm. Why would one get that impression?
Because she is a strong,
Uh-huh. What was he doing?
no, of course he was here probably doing business things which were not obvious in front of the public.
Yeah. Okay.
But I wasn't surprised that he left the company, because it's probably not very easy to work with Pauline. Her son can do it, or whatever. What is the other son doing?
He used to be a professor of Russian, and now is a lawyer.
When I was invited here, it was on Park Avenue when your Robert's second wife invited here. Oh, she had jewelry, am I right? Custom jewelry.
No, silver.
Silver? No.
Silver.
Yeah?
She designs it and has it made.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, Pauline's son was there, of course, you know, who works with the mother. And he seems to be very happy in business. I think Pauline is now much better because she kept her own style, whatever she does. And this is what many people want to wear.
So you think she made the right decision to stay
Absolutely.
exactly where she is?
Absolutely.
And not to do any licensing?
No, that
Another thing.
this is another thing. But fashion-wise,
Mm-hmm.
I admire this woman.
When did you stop working for Sachs?
73.
Oh, 73. So what have you been doing with yourself since 1973? How's your health?
No, it's no good because I had an accident on my leg, but never mind, it's not too bad. It healed and it's all right. But as long as you are asking, I did several things, not too interesting. And one day I got a call. A woman wanted to meet me. It's a great name. And I said, fine. She came here. She was Anne Cabot. And I'm speaking now about another world, my friend. She asked me if I would be ready to be companion, partly and mainly traveling with her mother, Mrs. Perkins. George W. Perkins.
Uh-huh.
Think.
Okay. And?
Who is George W.
I
Perkins?
don't know. I know the Cabot name. I don't know who George W. Perkins is.
George W. Perkins was the first American ambassador with NATO in Paris, 1948. Who is Mrs. Perkins? Von Merck.
Oh. Yes, okay.
Okay, now you will understand what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So I met Mrs. Perkins, who was then maybe 80, 82, something like this. I, in the meantime, worked for Sloan Catering, of course, on a voluntary job. And it's slightly enough of being in the library, working with the sick people, who, of course, all of them very cancer. Sick people talked about. I had enough then being with sick people.
Mm-hmm.
So I accepted. And Mrs. Perkins had the big estate between Garrison and Poughkeepsie on the hill going up 2,400 acres.
Only.
And all the houses, the fields, the animals. I mean, something which completely different than Paulina or all the other people. It's another world.
Yeah.
I'm speaking to you about another world.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking to you about the world I happen to know. Country, the kind of life I led as a small child. And she got very close to me. And the reason was her parents, Merck, you know what I'm speaking of,
Mm-hmm.
came to America in 1886.
Mm-hmm.
And as Europeans,
Mm-hmm.
her father started the company and wanted it to remain a small company. Then they had the 3 children, and unfortunately her mother didn't teach her enough the European culture. No languages,
Mm-hmm.
because they wanted to be American.
Right.
Now here I am, somebody who loves America, who led a very American life, but by the same time very European, with my 5 languages I speak,
Mm-hmm.
being quite sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
And here you see Mrs. Perkins. So we started to travel, including China and everything.
That's wonderful.
So here, just a minute. She traveled with me, you wouldn't believe it. In China, for instance, I didn't take cabs. I let her walk. I mean, we did the most marvelous trips which I organized, which you wouldn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I give you one other story, which you might enjoy. I was before in Morocco. I got very close to Oscar, and Oscar said to me, Anne, go to Morocco, go to the famous Mamounia Hotel, and here is the name of my driver. So I went one day to Morocco with a friend of mine, and then I said to Perkins, would you like to go to Morocco? Of course. So we went to Morocco, Casablanca, and then my driver picked us up and drove us to Marrakesh. And we arrived at the hotel, Mamounia, and the manager greeted me again and said, Madame Adam, the American ambassador, Ange Duke, is coming this afternoon, he's having a drink. Why don't you come down with Mrs. Perkins? Which we did. And Ange Duke was happy to meet Mrs. Perkins. And we chatted. And then he said, what are you going to do? So I said, traveling around Morocco, and then, of course, also Rabat. He said, okay, you are having a drink at the embassy. I said, fine. So when we arrived in Rabat, I called, and he asked us next day for a drink. And he couldn't invite many people from today till tomorrow, of course, so we were a small circle. And he said to Perkin, "What did you see, Mrs. Perkin?" So she said, "Why don't you ask Mrs. Adam?" So I told him where I took her, having known Morocco before. He looked at his secretary and said, "Why don't I know these places?" So this is the way how I traveled with her. I mean, I cannot tell you.
What a
And
wonderful.
not only that, but I got very, very close to the family. I just got a letter now from Anne Cabot. Oh, this might be of interest to your writing. Anne Cabot one day, and Mrs. Perkins died about 5 months ago, and for me that's the biggest blow. Because she was a mother to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the last trip I took with her was when Frank Cabot, who was the chairman of the Horticulture Society, invited me to go with them on all the islands. But then she was 92. And she had the most marvelous death, just in her sleep. Also the kind of life she led, which you can well imagine, not in the hospital, but with 2 nurses and the staff and so on and so on. And after she died, I'm in contact with Anne Cabot. Anne said to me, "What am I going to do with all the marvelous healing tests his mother got in Paris?" And I understood very well. And I said, "Anne, there are no antiques." And I found out to give it to the Brooklyn Museum. Mm-hmm. And I just got the note, the Christmas note from her. She said, "Many, many thanks. It was the best idea you had."
It's wonderful.
Because the dresses were made 1948, 49,
Mm-hmm.
50. Oh, I got her plenty of dresses, but I got her Oscar. She was a very elegant woman. Mm-hmm. She was the kind. I mean, I did things with her traveling, you wouldn't believe it. When Alain took her out lavishly in London, she knew Churchill, of course. And she enjoyed very much all my friends when I invited here quite often 30, 40 people and so on, All the people she met, it was for her not this world, but this world.
Yeah.
And
what a great match.
It was so incredible, my relationship with her. You wouldn't believe it, it's just...
How many years did you do this?
15 years, something like that.
Oh, that's a long time. Oh, this is a wonderful story.
Oh, that's why I'm telling it to you.
Let me ask you, something you said made me think, oh, I should ask this. What kind of women were the people who bought and wore Trigère dresses?
A completely different type.
Tell me.
The rich, good American people, not too sophisticated, but very good.
That's interesting. How does that... What kind of people bought Oscar de la Renta's? You. What kind of people bought Noël's?
People who knew they are wearing the best of the best are able to afford the Noël clothes.
So in terms of, if you had to strike
for me, Noël wasn't chic enough, in a way.
So who was the chicest?
Then Oscar. Yves Saint Laurent. And also, size-wise, these are the 2 designers I can wear.
Right.
Perfect.
I remember there was a woman with a figure like yours. It was Cy Newhouse's mother.
Yeah, just a moment. Now, for instance...
She was being fitted at Trigère.
Just a moment. Pauline said, "Why don't you order a dress? Can you see me in a Pauline Trigère dress?" No.
I'm not sure.
No.
But I was thinking that Mrs. Newhouse was being fitted at Trigère's.
Yeah, because these people, they knew that Trigère is very, very good.
Uh-huh.
Without looking well.
So you you describe her as a very competent designer, but not...
They're very chic.
But not very chic. That's interesting because I think that Pauline would be shocked to hear this. I think she thinks of herself as extremely chic.
I agree, and she is very chic in her own...
Her image of herself.
Right.
But her clothes didn't reach the most chic people. Is it because she was not inventive enough? Daring?
No. She was a very commercial. She knew exactly to whom to sell the clothes, who is going to wear her clothes. She knew exactly. The very good woman, the best middle-class American who could afford to pay that. No, look.
I went to the Costume Institute.
Yes.
Met.
Yeah.
And I saw there were no trees.
Oh, you mean now the latest one?
Yeah.
Of course, Dinah Vreeland,
Yeah.
who was, spoke only French to me. I gave them plenty of business to do, work and so on and so on. This was the chic woman who understood. Also, I think the first good exhibition is at the Costume Institute now. And the main thing is, I don't speak about the dresses which are being shown, but the way how it's being done, everything explained. She was incredible.
What did she think of Trigers?
I never asked her. I never. She was mainly very much interested in what I was doing at Sachs with the French dresses. When I copied them here, I mean the people who copied them for me, which was
who would do the work for you?
Designers, very big names.
Who would copy?
The dresses which I chose in Paris.
Under their names?
Under their name, which means under the French name. This was a very official thing which I did. Where I had to buy so and so many dresses from certain designers, which was Dior or whoever, and then they made the money on the copies.
They made the money on the copies too?
Of course.
Oh, it was a percentage?
Yeah, right.
Right. So which designers here would want to put their own name on a copy of the...
They were not the big designers. They were the very commercial.
Right, Okay. So in all this, it gives me the feeling that you knew Robert not really that well.
Oh, I did know him very well. I did see him, and he also knew my family, where he was very happy whenever my cousin invited, and so on. But Robert lived his own life.
I interviewed somebody yesterday who told me the same thing. She said, I knew him very well, and I didn't know him at all.
I did, yes, I do, as you know me by now a little bit, that I can judge him very well, who Robert was. He had this incredibly strong sister. So he was below.
Did you see him as competent?
No. And nothing. He suffered of Pauline's being the macho person. He was very intelligent. Very.
Makes you sorry for him a little bit.
In a way. But
do you remember feeling that way for him then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think other buyers were of the same opinion?
I just don't know, because I didn't have very much to do with other buyers. Which you well understand. I mean, I let my...
Competitors?
No. I ran my department, I was just myself and couldn't care less. I didn't even know them. First of all, socially, I had nothing to do with them. I led another life. Right?
Yeah.
Which is another.
Well, I think this is enough. For now, anyway.
Right. If ever you want to, just to get in touch with me, just to call me, please, can you be an angel?
I don't need to be an angel to do that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Not even...